There isn't really a good way to start this video, but I felt like it was something I had to make. We lost the twins on December 22nd, right before Christmas. And I was initially planning on waiting a little bit longer to make this video, but I stupidly made the decision to make the 3 videos about the twins that I'd already made public on my YouTube channel. They were originally unlisted, and the reason for that was because I had kept them unlisted because a really good friend of mine has like no social media other than following me on YouTube, and my whole plan was that he was the only one that I could really keep the secret that it was twins. He didn't know I was pregnant, but he didn't know it was twins, so I was planning on actually surprising him with the second baby when he came to visit them after they were born. So after we lost them, I just, you know, those videos are still part of my story, so I just changed them to public instead of unlisted. And since then, I've gotten quite a few new subscribers, way more than I would have ever expected. I'm used to getting like maybe 1 new subscriber a year, if that, because like I don't do this for subscribers or anything, but I know that I'm getting a lot of new followers, and it's 100% because of the twin content. I was putting out the 3 videos that had to do with the twins, and you know, people are commenting congratulations and stuff on those videos, so I felt like I needed to just get this out of the way, make this video. I'm really sorry to any new followers who, you know, thought you were going to watch an exciting chapter of our lives. Unfortunately, that's not the way. It's not the way that's gonna go. I did initially write a blog a few days after the loss because it was the easiest way for me to write down everything that happened while it was still kind of fresh in my memory, and it was the easiest way for me to share with the most people what had happened without having to film this video and without having to have a whole bunch of individual conversations talking about it over and over again. So I'm mostly going to be reading my blog for this video just to kind of explain what happened, and I might expand on things here and there, I might not. But I started December exhausted, but was excited for Xavier's first Christmas. I was looking forward to having the first normal Christmas with my family in almost 3 years. I was overwhelmed, stressed while balancing work, taking care of the house, taking care of Xavier, and being pregnant with twins. For some context, we found out we were expecting identical twins when Xavier was around 7 months old. He is turning 1 in less than a month now. It was incredibly unexpected because it took 3 years to conceive Xavier, so we never thought it would happen so soon for us, let alone be twins. I never ever thought in a million years that twins would be like part of my life. I never thought that that would be something that could happen to me, especially after our diagnosis, because my diagnosis is diminished ovarian reserve, so the odds of us even having twins is just astronomically low, and I still can't believe that it happened to us. We found out they were boys pretty early on through the NIPT blood test. There were some concerns about the level of risk with the type of twins I was having. They were modi, which means they share a placenta, but they have their own amniotic sacs. The biggest concern being twin-to-twin transfusion syndrome, which basically means that one twin gets too much blood flow and the other doesn't get enough, which can be fatal for both babies if it's not caught in time. Once we knew this, I was going in for ultrasounds every 2 weeks. And up until my anatomy scan, both babies were growing right on track and looked perfect. And just to take a pause, I'm probably not going to do very much editing of this video, but if there is cuts, or if you notice cuts or anything, it's probably just because I'm cutting out long periods where I'm trying not to cry, or I'm getting over a cold, so I have a bit of a cough left over. So if I have any coughing episodes, I'll be editing those out as well. December 22nd to December 24th, my whole life was flipped upside down and was the most traumatic experience I've ever gone through. I don't know why, but I had a bad feeling going into my anatomy scan on the 22nd. So this was December 22nd. And I really can't explain why. I just had a bad feeling, and I get weird instinctual feelings about things that have proven to be true in the past, and I wish that I had trusted my gut and like called my midwife or called my OB or gone in sooner. Like, I don't know if it would have changed anything, but that's one of the regrets that I have. There was no logical way to why I felt that way, I just did. I knew it was supposed to be a long appointment, especially long because for twins, they have to check everything for both of them, so what's typically maybe like an hour-long appointment could be up to 2 hours for twins. Yet, when I was laying on the ultrasound table, I was making a conscious effort not to look at the ultrasound tech's face, because I somehow knew I would see some type of micro-expressions indicating something wasn't right. About 20 minutes into the appointment, she told me I could go empty my bladder, and that she would be right back. What she actually said was that she had to go to the washroom too, and that she would meet me back at the room. And what I realized after the fact is what she was probably doing was going to go speak with my doctor. When I returned, I sat back down on the table, and she told me she was going to move me over to an examination room and that my doctor was going to come speak with me. I knew at that moment they were gone. I didn't bother asking the tech anything because I knew she couldn't say, so I just silently followed her to the other room. As soon as the door shut, I was overcome with anxiety. I couldn't stop shaking, and I was crying by the time my OB came in, and she really didn't beat around the bush. I don't think I'm ever gonna forget her saying these words. Unfortunately, it appears that both babies have died. There were no answers as to why. She said the ultrasound indicated that one of the babies may have experienced heart failure, and because of the shared blood vessels and placenta, the other likely passed soon after, but there was no way to know for sure. She said it could have even been twin-to-twin transfusion syndrome, but again, there was no way to really know. And I had no idea it could happen so quickly when 2 weeks prior they were perfect. My doctor had to call my husband to come get me because I'd gone to the appointment alone, and I was told I would need to go to the hospital that day to be induced. I was terrified for so many reasons, apart from the reason I was having to go there. I'd never been to the hospital before. I had never had to be a patient in a hospital before. I had no idea what to expect for the induction or for the delivery or any of that. I was terrified of IVs. I was worried I wouldn't be home in time for Xavier's first Christmas, because keep in mind this was 3 days before Christmas. I was overwhelmed at the thought of having to tell everyone what was going on, but most of all I was worried about being away from Xavier because I'd never been away from him for more than a few hours and we were still breastfeeding. I was also overwhelmed with guilt, wondering if there's anything I could have done. A week or so prior, I was a little bit concerned because I'd never felt baby A move, yet I did start feeling baby B move a couple times. But the way in which baby B was moving was so sudden and erratic, and I remember when I was pregnant with Xavier, when I started feeling his movements, it was very subtle. It was like, you know, those light flutters, it was those little boops that gradually got stronger over time. But the first time I felt baby B move, it was like it was like he flipped completely over. It was so jarring that it actually made me yell out. I don't know if that was an indication that that's when something was happening or not. I never will know, but it's something I think about. And I felt him do that a couple times on I think only one day, and then I never felt him move after, and I never felt baby A move at all. And that was the day of my last ultrasound, so I had gotten an ultrasound, everything was perfect, and then later that evening is when I felt those jarring movements for the first time and then never again. And I'm wondering if something happened to baby A at that time, and then the movements I was feeling from baby B was baby B struggling. Again, I'll never know. I was regretting not trusting my instincts or asking more questions. I also felt guilty because I felt so disconnected with this pregnancy, and this is something I probably want to make a video about in the future, going more into detail, but I was just so overwhelmed with it happening way sooner than we expected. I was overwhelmed with the thought of having 3 under 2. I didn't know how I was going to do it. I was overwhelmed with stretching my bank account to get everything we needed for twins, plus get everyone's Christmas gifts. And also I was just so busy, I was constantly forgetting I was even pregnant. I was stressed about not being able to work enough before going on mat leave again. because I, like, the first 3 months of this year, or last year, I already wasn't working because I was taking time off with Xavier. And I was feeling guilty for having more babies so soon because Xavier wasn't going to get as much one-on-one time anymore, and I would have to stop breastfeeding him way sooner than I wanted to. And I didn't give myself the opportunity to start getting excited about this pregnancy. So when I found out they were gone, it didn't feel completely real. And honestly, talking about it now, even though I've already written it down, I honestly didn't expect to cry so early on in this video. But I think saying it out loud is different. But for the most part, since then, it's all kind of felt very much like a dream. Like, I feel very disconnected from the whole experience. It feels like it didn't happen to me. It feels like I wasn't even pregnant. Like, the whole pregnancy, the whole experience at the hospital, it feels like it was a dream I had. It feels like it wasn't real. And I don't know if that's just my mind's way of coping, but I mean, it feels real right now when I'm talking about it. So, when this was happening, I was still devastated. I still bawled my eyes out at the office when I found out. I almost had a panic attack. And at the same time, I felt like I didn't have the right to feel that way because I hadn't celebrated the pregnancy in the way that I knew it deserved to be. And I didn't write about this part because it's something that I'm still really struggling with. The guilt that surrounds it. And it's because I did have pretty severe gender disappointment, and I'm like ashamed and embarrassed to even admit that. I know it's a very real thing that people experience, but I like hadn't gotten to the point yet where I was excited about the pregnancy. So throwing that on top of it, you know, I have my boy and I love him and I adore him and I wouldn't change him for anything. If I was having 2 girls, I would have felt like my family was complete. I think we would have been done after that point. I've always imagined myself having girls. I was just so excited to have a girl someday. And it's just so hard to explain and it feels so wrong. So one of the things I struggle with is like, it's something I don't like to think about, but it runs through my head all the time. And I've been told by so many different people, by doctors, by my midwives, by so many people, that there's nothing I could have done. Nothing I did was the reason. I worry that further, God, I can't say it. I worry that for their entire existence that they might have felt like unwanted or unloved, which wasn't true. It's not true. Anyways, I need to move on from this. So Peter picked me up and we went home first to grab some things because my doctor said it wasn't a rush. So I got home and like, I guess I just participated in some mundane tasks. I got home, I made Xavier some broccoli. I waited for him to wake up so I could nurse him once more before we left, and then we went. At the hospital, it was one long waiting game. Checking in felt like it took forever and involved a million questions that I had to answer between tears, trying to keep it together so I was coherent. We got a private room, thank goodness. I got an IV put in, and then eventually a doctor came to start the induction around 5:30 p.m. And everything from here on out is very blurry to me because it all felt like one really long day. I didn't really experience contractions in the conventional sense or what I was expecting based on what I'd experienced with my labor with Xavier. For me, it was just a constant ache that felt like very mild menstrual cramps, but it wasn't coming and going, it was just always there. The cramps got progressively worse over the next 2 hours, but they were never too painful for me to breathe through, and like they kept offering me pain medication, but I continued to decline because I really wasn't in very much pain. I had had menstrual cramps with my periods that were way worse than what I was experiencing at that time. I was in and out of sleep throughout the night, being woken up periodically by a stronger cramping sensation, but it all kind of felt like it was a dream. At 5:10 a.m. I had a particularly bad one that woke me up a bit more, and at the same time I felt one of the waters burst, which was accompanied with kind of a flash of pain. And I kind of yelled out a bit because I just didn't expect my water to break like that in this situation. I didn't know what to expect. I didn't know if they would have to break my waters manually or if they would break on their own. with Xavier, I did have like that same water breaking gush, but I didn't know if it would be the same in this case because they were so much smaller. I just didn't know what to expect. I immediately pressed the nurse call button. They asked me what was going on. I said one of my waters broke. Peter woke up when I had yelled, and literally as soon as I finished speaking to whoever was on the speaker, one of the babies came out all on his own. And I was frozen with shock. I was kind of laying on my right side when he came out, and I was frozen. I was scared to move, and I knew for sure it was one of the babies, but I was also afraid to look. But I ended up looking anyways, and I saw that I was right. All I remember is just gripping the side rails of the bed really hard to try and control my shaking, but I was shaking uncontrollably from shock. So Peter came over and held my hand. The nurse came in, and Peter told me later that she also looked visibly shocked that one of the babies was delivered already, and she called for the doctor, even though I had warned her earlier that my pain tolerance was weird and I wasn't going to be able to tell her if I was close or not based on my pain. So whenever they say, on a scale of 0 to 10, what's your pain? I'm like, at that time, I would have rated it a 7. Like, so, and even then, I feel like that's being generous, like 6, 7, it really wasn't that bad. Like, it was just something I was able to breathe through, and it was the same with Xavier. Like, I went from 0 to 10 centimeters within a few hours. I don't know, I guess I have a high pain tolerance. I don't know, the way that they were offering me pain medication, I think they were expecting it to be a lot more painful for me. So I don't know how it is for other people, but for me, it wasn't very painful, but it was still very shocking. And if anything, that almost makes it more shocking for me because there's no warning. Like, I had no idea it was gonna happen in that moment. It wasn't like slowly, it wasn't escalating to a point where it was getting so painful and I knew it was gonna happen soon. Just all of a sudden, it's just everything was happening all at once. The doctor came and they carefully cut the cord and took the first baby away. After he had been delivered, my pain immediately went away. I didn't feel anything anymore. There was still that very, very mild cramping sensation that I had initially started out with, but there was none of the, like, actual contraction, like, pain that I was having. So we were initially waiting for the second one to come out on his own, but eventually the doctor had me kind of manually push, and I delivered baby B still in his amniotic sac at 5:40 a.m. And then was the long waiting game for the placenta to be delivered, which I had expected to be the easiest part because that's how it was with Xavier, but that wasn't the case, and this is where things started getting more complicated. Throughout all this and prior, I had been asked many questions about what I wanted to happen after they were delivered. Did I want to hold them? I said yes. Did I want photos? I said yes. The biggest decision was whether to let the hospital handle the burial or if we wanted to make our own arrangements. I learned that if I was 20 plus weeks, then we would have been responsible for the arrangements regardless. But babies born before 20 weeks, the hospital offers to take care of it. Once a year, they do a special burial of the cremated remains of babies born prior to 20 weeks in a mass grave, which we had the option of being notified when and where that would be taking place. I was told this usually happens in October. I was grateful that we had this option because I think it would have been too much more to handle otherwise. And one more week and it would have been different for us because I miscarried at 19 weeks. While waiting for the placenta, I was asked again if I wanted to hold them. And I know it sounds like they were asking me these questions a million times, and they did ask me several times because they wanted to check in and wanted me to be sure, because you could change your mind at any point. And for example, when I had initially asked Peter before they were delivered if he wanted to hold them, he said he wasn't sure. And I initially said I wasn't sure either, and then I had to think about it. But then the time came to decide, and he decided at that time that he wasn't comfortable, so he stepped away. So I said yes. So the nurse wrapped him up in the blanket and gently placed him in my arms. And in this part is where I said I asked Peter prior if he wanted to hold them, and he said he wasn't sure. And at this time he decided he wasn't comfortable, so he stepped away to the other side of the room while I had my moment with them. And I was completely supportive of that because I wanted him to be comfortable with every decision made as well, because obviously this is something traumatic that he's going through as well. They were each small enough to fit in my hand. Baby A was 125 grams and baby B was 105 grams. I could tell, oh sorry, I got it mixed up before, sorry, baby A is the one that I felt move and baby B is the one that I hadn't felt move. I could tell that baby B was the one that had the initial issue because he looked less developed, was more red, and was visibly smaller. The nurse took a few photos for me. It felt very surreal looking at them. It still didn't quite feel real. I was surprised that I didn't cry at this moment, even though I had been crying on and off the entire time prior. I was just focused on them, taking in every little detail, and I didn't want tears to blur my vision. I could see their tiny fingers and the beginnings of their noses, and they were kind of like lying side by side, like one was spooning the other. One of the things that had upset me the most was that we hadn't even named them yet, and it's what I was thinking about for most of the night while waiting for them to be delivered. And when I looked at them, I felt like I knew what their names were. After I gave them back to the nurse, I talked to Peter about the names. They were names that I'd briefly mentioned a while back when trying to think of some, but we hadn't really talked about it since then. Peter agreed on the names, and it immediately felt right to me. It felt better knowing they had names and identities. The first names were just ones I liked in passing. I liked how they sounded together. I liked them separately. And the middle names are after their daddy and their uncle, who are also twins. And I thought it was fitting. Their names are Hudson Peter Sauer and Grayson Paul Sauer. While waiting for the placenta to come out, I was having episodes of sweating, hot flashes, lightheadedness, nausea, dizziness, tingly limbs, and sudden drops in my blood pressure because my cervix was trying to close but couldn't because the placenta was half out. I tried pushing, but it wasn't helping, and I felt too weak to do so for long. So my doctor ended up pulling some of it out, which she was originally avoiding trying to do because you want the placenta to come out whole so you can inspect it and make sure that none of it was left behind. Also, in this case, they wanted to be able to inspect it to see if there was any obvious indicators about the placenta as to why the pregnancy didn't go to term. So my doctor ended up pulling some of it out manually, but wasn't sure if there was any left, so she ordered me an abdominal ultrasound, but my blood pressure kept tanking and I was losing a lot of blood, so they sent me for an emergency D&C for suspected retained placenta, which can be very dangerous. Under normal circumstances, I would have been terrified and panicked, being wheeled off to some unknown location without Peter to have a procedure I'd never had before, didn't know anything about, but I was too weak to even feel scared. They had to put another IV in before the procedure so they could give me a blood transfusion and give me the twilight medication at the same time, but my veins were collapsed from blood loss and I was freezing. They kept trying to warm me up and had to poke my other hand several times. They were even going into my wrist and stuff, and like I have super bony wrists, so it was super painful. The anesthesiologist finally said he was going to give me something to take the edge off, and when he started the medication, the burning in my other hand made me completely forget the IV attempts in my right hand. Next thing I know, I'm waking up, the procedure is done, and I'm being wheeled back to my room. I don't know how long I was in there, but thankfully I didn't have any additional pain from the procedure, which is something I'm grateful for. Eventually, I was finally taken down to get my ultrasound just to check that everything was out, and I learned very quickly that I was going to experience unexpected triggers probably for a while. And for some reason, this part of the story always gets me. Usually, when I would go for ultrasounds, I can't see the screen until the end when the tech turns it towards me and shows me the babies. This time, you were in a weird, like, dark curtain room, and I could see the screen the whole time, and I made the mistake of looking out of habit, and seeing nothing there made me really upset. That somehow made it feel more real that they were gone than when I was holding them in my arms. It was also really strange because the ultrasound tech had no context as to why I was there, so I had to explain the whole situation, which I feel like wasn't my job to do. The ultrasound confirmed that everything was cleared out. Sometime in the evening, I was sitting in bed, and I was feeling pretty okay in terms of like pain and everything, but I randomly just started having uncontrollable diarrhea. It came out of nowhere. I pressed the nurse call button immediately, saying I was having a bathroom emergency. But I didn't know how long it would take the nurses to get there, and I had literally no control over my body, which is an awful feeling, and I feel for everyone that has to deal with things like that on the daily. I'd been feeling relatively okay, so I asked Peter to help me to the bathroom really quickly. I got there okay, the nurse came, checked on me, we thought all was fine, so she left again while I cleaned myself up. But when I stood up and held onto the metal bar in the washroom, I was met with an immediate rush of lightheadedness and tingly limbs. But I thought I could make it back to the bed because it was only a few steps away. So I started to walk out, and Peter told me afterwards that he noticed I was kind of wobbly, so he put his arms under my armpits to steady me, but then I tried to brace myself on the bed table. Apparently I sent my dinner tray flying across the room, and then my legs gave out and I passed out in Peter's arms. So it's lucky that he was already holding me, because we might have had to add a head injury to the list of things I was dealing with. I woke up on the floor so confused. It felt like I was having a dream, because I thought Peter and I had been at home watching Young Sheldon. Peter somehow managed to use his foot to bring my IV card over, and somehow reached far enough across the bed to press the nurse call button while holding me. I still don't know how he did that. So when I woke up, there was already 2 nurses there. One of them was like trying to frantically clean up the broken glass on the floor from the dinner tray, and the other one was trying to figure out what was going on with me. And Peter said when I passed out, he leaned my head back onto his shoulder and my eyes were rolling to the back of my head, which must have been scary. So that was stupid on my part. I made sure not to get up on my own again until I was told I could. I got back into bed and was given another blood transfusion. My OB came to see me after and explained that my blood work from earlier that day had come back with my hemoglobin at 66, which was very low. And this was already, the nurses hadn't been letting on how concerning things were, so we had no idea, and this was after I'd already had a blood transfusion. So prior to that, it was dangerously low, which is why I was having all those episodes and dropping of blood pressure. I was being given several rounds of antibiotics, and after my second blood transfusion, I was also given an iron transfusion, which I'm currently going back into the hospital for outpatient iron transfusions, 3 rounds. I've already done 1 round, so I have at least 1 more round, if not 2, until I'm like back to normal. And by the second night, I was so emotionally, mentally, and physically exhausted. I hadn't really gotten any real sleep since being there, so I was delirious from exhaustion. I found it impossible to sleep when you have both hands hooked up to machines. Those machines are beeping constantly, and wearing a blood pressure cuff that goes off every 15 minutes. I was finally given an Ativan to relax, and I finally got some sleep. Throughout this whole process, I cycled through crying spells, feeling guilty, missing Xavier and worrying that he would think we abandoned him, forgetting why I was at the hospital entirely, and covering up my true feelings with humor, because it's how I cope in public spaces. We finally got discharged on the evening of Christmas Eve, and I was home in time to snuggle and nurse Xavier before bedtime. I became really upset when we were being discharged though, because like I'd mentioned, previous nurses had asked me if I wanted photos that I was told had to be done on their camera, so this was photos separate from the ones they'd taken on my phone for me. And a memento box, which they mentioned. I'd said yes every time I was asked, and I was told when they were happening and after they were done that I would get the photos on a CD or USB stick. My nurse came and had me write down their names so she could write little cards for their memory box. Peter heard all of these things too, and I confirmed with him after to make sure I wasn't crazy and misremembering. But my discharge nurse had no idea what I was talking about. She couldn't check if photos were even taken, and said that there was no notes about it in my chart. She also didn't know anything about a memento box. It didn't help that she kept rambling and repeating herself, and one of the things she kept repeating was, if there are no photos, there's nothing we can do because they're already gone. And she kept saying, they're already gone, they're already gone. This wasn't something I needed to be reminded of over and over, so I left the hospital crying. Christmas plans had to be canceled and rescheduled for the 3rd year in a row. Some of my family asked if we wanted to cancel entirely, but I didn't want Xavier's first Christmas to be ruined for him despite not knowing any different. That would have broken my heart even more. I also thought that being around normal Christmas festivities and family would be a welcome distraction. I wanted to look back on happy memories of his first Christmas and not be reminded of the days that my life was falling apart. So I laughed, I opened presents, I smiled for pictures, and I hope someday I can look back on those photos to find at least some genuine joy there amongst the sadness. So that's the whole blog post. Since then, since coming home, I was very weak, very tired because my hemoglobin was so low and it was going to take a while to get back to that, so Peter was a really huge help. But then first week of January, Peter was back at work and I was taking care of Xavier full-time again, and both of us got sick with something. Honestly, I think it was just a basic cold, but Xavier's turned into a double ear infection, which even though we had seen our family doctor, and he didn't notice the ear infection. And then we had gone to Emerge because it had been a week of his fever not going away and it was getting higher, and Emerge didn't notice anything. Emerge arranged a follow-up appointment with a pediatrician 2 days later, and the pediatrician noticed the double ear infection. So we were finally given antibiotics. The poor kid was friggin' suffering way longer than he needed to. And me, I think I just caught the same thing as him, but it hit me so hard because my immune system was just wrecked. Like, it was shot. It was not ready to fight off any type of virus at that time. So I also had fever for like a week. I'm still dealing with the cough now. I'm better. Like, my congestion's gone, my headaches are gone, all that, but it's just the cough lasts forever for me. So we've both finally gotten over that, and now we're just trying to get him back on his regular schedule, but it's been really hard because there hasn't been a single moment where I've been able to even process everything that happened before Christmas, because after Christmas it was the holiday stuff and, you know, seeing family, which I really enjoyed doing. I'm glad we did it. I don't regret not canceling Christmas events. And then it was us getting sick, and I was just trying to take care of Xavier, and now I'm getting behind on work because I don't have childcare for Xavier right now. And I'm really hoping that next week I can start just freaking getting my life back together, because I feel like my mind is in chaos. I need to figure out constructive ways to deal with my grief, which I think I'm doing, like writing, doing creative things like making videos and writing are my outlets for things like this. And I am also writing a song for my family song contest about the boys. So those types of things really help me, and I bought these beautiful ornaments from an Etsy shop in memory of the boys for the Christmas tree. And Peter and I are going to do kind of a little, I guess, a little ceremony, so to speak, sometime in the spring. We already have plans to kind of redo our whole outdoor area. So we're going to think of like a special plant or something that we want to plant in honor of them, and I want to get like a little plaque made, you know, just things like that, because you don't get the experience of a funeral where you feel like you get to really say goodbye. And October is really far away for the service that the hospital does, so I think we need to do something a bit sooner than that. As an update, we did get the memento boxes. The social worker we were in contact with at the hospital who came to speak with us, that was the other thing the discharge nurse kept saying, was call the social worker, like she'll help figure it out. So she actually ended up calling me and was so apologetic about the miscommunication, that we absolutely should have gotten memento boxes, and that she would look into the photos and get back to me and figure it all out, not to worry. So she did, like, thank goodness for her. And she made sure that we got those memento boxes, and there was actually a lot more stuff in there than I ever expected, and it was really sweet. There's like these little paper rulers that measures how long each of them were. They each have a little certificate of life with their stats and stuff on it, and there's a little box with like a little hat, and the hats are literally like, they're so small, like they would have fit, and it's the hats that made me cry. And there's like these little tiny baby blankets that I know people crochet and donate to the hospital for situations like this. I also crochet, so it's actually something, I think that would also be a good thing for me to do, is if I were to make blankets for that and donate them. I know it's stupid to apologize again, but I'm sorry to all the new subscribers that I've received over the past couple weeks. I know this isn't the content that you signed up for. I hope you stick around anyways and continue to watch and support our family building journey. And thank you for your excitement and your sweet comments on the videos that I did post about the twins. So yeah, that's all. Okay, thank you. Bye.